this is Dana and welcome to my channel, The Orchid Hut. This is going to be video number 4 in a playlist called the Neophyte series, mostly aimed at beginning orchid growers, especially those that are primarily growing Phalaenopsis orchids. However, even if you are a more experienced or advanced grower with Phalaenopsis, you might pick up some new information in this video, so stay tuned either way. The purpose of the video is to talk through the collection or group of Phalaenopsis orchids that I have now in the month of April that did not spike during the fall or winter season like Phalaenopsis usually do. Okay, so when this happens as a beginning orchid grower, you have to kind of take each orchid one by one and think through what might be the reason or reasons why the Phalaenopsis didn't spike. Because ultimately, we want our orchids to rebloom, but there could be certain situations that, just cause the orchid not to be in its best condition, and maybe we can remedy that during the growing season so that we can get it to bloom the next fall and winter when the spiking season rolls around again next year. So if you're a beginning grower, you may have purchased a Phalaenopsis in bloom over the fall and winter, and when you cut that bloom spike off, you will be hoping for repeat blooming in the next blooming season. But when that doesn't happen, this video is giving you some ideas for what to think about and what to change so that you can be more successful blooming in the upcoming season. Okay, so we are going to take all of these orchids as individuals because they are, each one is different, has a different set of circumstances, is, maybe potted a bit differently, has a different root system, has different vegetative growth. I mean, every single one of them is different. And every single one of them came into my collection at a different time. And we're going to talk through each one and kind of set aside the ones that maybe need to have something done to them for the growing season, or maybe they just need to be left alone, because that's definitely another option. All right, so let me kind of give you just some numbers here so that you know sort of the totality of my Phalaenopsis collection. So I have 24 primary or complex hybrid Phalaenopsis orchids in my collection. Now this is not counting the species, this is not counting the Bellina orchids. So I'm just kind of as an example here, using the ones that are hybrids or complex hybrids, more the grocery store type Phalaenopsis orchids. And so I have 24 of those in my collection. Several were added just last year. And I have taken out the 6 Phalaenopsis orchids that are the Follow Me Phalaenopsis orchids for this year. So I have removed those from this video because at the end of April, I'll be giving an update on the Follow Me Phalaenopsis orchids, and so we will address those 6 orchids separately. So when I take those 6 out, now I'm working with 18 hybrid or complex hybrid Phalaenopsis orchids, and out of those 18, the 8 in front of the camera did not spike. So that means that 10 out of the 18 did. So, 8, did not spike. But let's walk through each one and talk about what the reasons might be. And then we will kind of analyze what I might be doing during the growing season to correct the problem. Okay, so let's just start on one end here and work our way down. So I'll move a few out of the way so that the one I'm talking about can be in front of the camera. Okay, so this orchid right here was my tea soak orchid, and I'll put a link to that very, very popular video in the upper right hand corner of the screen. But this one was purchased last year in bloom and became dehydrated, and I did a tea soak on it, and then I repotted it, and it had 2 bloom spikes, so that kind of drained a lot of the energy from the plant, and it was repotted kind of late in the year. It is growing a new leaf now. It does have some new root growth in the pot, but it did not bloom again. Okay, so why? Well, this orchid came from a grower who sort of forced the blooming out of cycle, I would say. And so when this orchid came into my environment, it's going to need at least a full year to kind of get back in the blooming cycle that I would have in my environment. So since the spikes were cut later in the year last year, and since it was repotted then, this orchid did not have the energy. It was dehydrated. It just didn't have the energy to put out a bloom spike for this season. So because I know this orchid's history, and because I know I just repotted it, I'm not going to be doing anything with this orchid except waiting patiently for it to have an opportunity to set a spike at the end of 2022 or maybe at the beginning of 2023. So the focus right now for this orchid is to continue helping it develop its root system with good fertilizing practices, let it develop this leaf and maybe some others, and next year the blooming will probably happen again. Okay, so really nothing to do with that one. This little orchid is actually a keiki from my gigantic white Phalaenopsis that's blooming in the bay window right now. So this is a very, very young orchid, maybe 2 or 3 years old now. It's not mature enough. It has recently been repotted, and I just know that it's not a large enough plant yet to bloom. So again, this is a wait and let it grow, let it develop roots, let it develop vegetative growth this year, and maybe in a few more years I can expect this one to actually bloom. So this is a baby orchid. There's a reason why this one's not blooming. Okay, and then this one. Okay, so this one is probably a bit different. So it is mature enough to bloom. You can see an old bloom spike that was cut a while back. It's putting on new root growth right here. It's putting on new leaf growth right here. However, it has been in this pot, and this media is rather old. This one is due for a repot right now. And I'm going to be putting this in the more typical clear Phalaenopsis pots that I like to use so that I can see how the roots are developing, and maybe that will make this plant a bit healthier. It could just be that it was taking a break from blooming, but I do know that the media here is old, and one of the things that I can do to help it out for next season and maybe get a spike is to give it some fresh growing media and be able to have it in a way so that I can watch its roots. Okay, so this one is going to be set aside for repotting, and that's going to be my strategy for hopefully getting it to bloom next year. Okay, next orchid is one that I also purchased in the fall. It had 2 bloom spikes on it. It needed to be repotted. Since that time, it is developing a new leaf. It has put out this new root right here. It's putting out another new root right here. Inside the pot, you can see some root tips growing. So it is focusing on root growth and vegetative growth right now. Again, it was a late bloomer because the grower that it came from had probably forced its blooming out of season for commercial purposes. And you can't expect it to send out a new bloom spike again that soon when it's adjusting to your environment. So again, I know this one is freshly potted. It's just a matter of being patient, and maybe at the end of this year, it will be ready to sync itself with my blooming cycle for Phalaenopsis orchids. And it is dropping a leaf, a little tiny one right here. Okay, so this is another one that we really don't need to do anything with. And this one is my Sweetie Cat Phalaenopsis. And this one also was purchased last year, had a bloom spike, needed to be repotted, so I took care of that. It's putting on new leaf growth. It's got some new roots happening here as well as inside the pot. So this one again, a new acquisition from last year that just needs to have time to kind of get itself in sync with my blooming cycle, focusing now on getting a good root system, getting some good vegetative growth for the growing season, and maybe this one will spike the next time around. So again, this one is not anything that I have to do to address or change. Okay, now this orchid is a bit different. I have had this orchid for a number of years, and when I purchased it, it was in bloom. The spike that was cut off years ago is way down at the bottom of the pot. You can't even see it anymore, and it has not bloomed for years, 2-3 years. Now it has been repotted since I've had it, but again, it's due for a repot. So I'm going to be giving this one fresh media. That will be one thing that I will do. And the other thing I think I'm going to do is maybe try growing this one under the grow lights during the winter of next year, because in my bay window, the light really diminishes. This one may actually want a bit more light in the fall and winter. So I will move this one under the grow lights after it has been repotted now, and we'll see if that makes a difference. You know, it looks to be a healthy Phalaenopsis. The leaves look good. You know, there's really not anything about it that seems dehydrated, although the media is a bit old and it might want a slightly larger pot to grow in. But hey, those will be the two things that I'll try: fresh media and growing under a bit brighter light in the winter. Okay, so this one I can actually do something with. And then this little, more of a novelty Phalaenopsis, it was also one that I purchased last year, and it was in bloom. And when I went to repot it, its root system was pretty poor. It has since started some new root growth here, and not so much in the pot, but I do know that this is fresh media. There is a bit of dehydration in some of these leaves, so I've been trying to keep it a bit more hydrated. Again, I would not have expected this one to bloom again so soon. It was you know, needing to focus on root growth. It was needing to adjust to my environment. So this is another wait and see kind of orchid. Nothing to do. It just needs a bit more time, I think. Okay, so this one I'm going to set aside. I really don't need to do anything with it. And then the last out of the 8 orchids is this very, very large one. And this is actually one of the original orchids in my collection as far as Phalaenopsis goes. It was maybe like the 3rd or the 4th Phalaenopsis I ever had. And it has been repotted. It was a great bloomer early on, and then all of a sudden it stopped blooming, and I discovered that the root system in the pot was failing, and so it was repotted. But it is due to be repotted again this year. You can tell that even though it's been in this pot now for like going on 3 years, the root growth down in here is not spectacular. It's still struggling as far as its root system goes. So when I unpot this one, I may be doing something a bit different to see if I can encourage some more root growth at the bottom of this axis so that those roots can go in the media. It's got a ton of air roots. I do mist it from time to time to keep it hydrated, but you know, it's just not thriving, and it's an older orchid, so that could be part of the issue too. But in any case, the plan for this one is going to be repot it, see what the roots are like, give it new media, maybe do something a little bit different depending on what I find inside the pot. But I do know that this one successfully bloomed in my bay window, so it's not a light issue. It's not a fertilizing issue because I haven't really changed anything like that with this orchid. It's just behaving a bit differently now that it's older. It has taken several years off, kind of a break from blooming, but I think it has to do with the lack of a really good root system down inside the media. Okay, so this one I will be doing something with, and let me pull back the ones that are actually going to need some attention, and there's really only 3. So that's the good news. These are the 3 that I will be doing something with to see if I can encourage blooming for next season. And the other 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 are simply wait and see situations because they just need a bit more time to get back on the blooming cycle that I have and to adapt to my environment. Okay, so if you have Phalaenopsis orchids that did not bloom this year, pause for just a moment for every single one of them and think about what you could possibly do to be more successful next year. And thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video or learned something new, please give it a thumbs up, and the subscribe button will be coming up in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen. Talk to you next time.